This is a corm, and this is full of hope and potential, but it's also full of disappointment and heartbreak, and it all is going to come down to luck. But you might be paying hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars for one of these. Hey, Pablo from Aroid Vibes Only, and I wanted to give you the perfect blueprint and cheat code about corms. So I'm going to tell you what they are, all the things you could do to make them sprout and succeed, and also all the things that could go wrong. So what are corms? Corms are basically a type of clone of your Alocasia. Sometimes they're confused with like tubers or any of the other similar ways how plants store energy in the root system. But this is meant to be a copy, a genetic identical copy of the other plant. So that makes it a great way of multiplying species because you will basically just get a same clone genetic material of the prior one, but that is where it brings some of the risk of corms from variegated plants, because it doesn't necessarily mean that the clone that you just got is going to be exactly just as variegated as the other. Sometimes there is a percentage that will have no variegation, another percentage that's going to have full variegation, and then somewhere in between that you're going to have the happy medium. So it is risky to buy a corm because it's a clone, but if it's from a species or something like that, it's a lot safer because you're basically going to get the exact copy of the other species. So why do corms happen? Well, plants want to live. And I know it's like, shocker, given how many we kill and how it's like, here's the perfect conditions, and she's like dead. But plants actually want to succeed, and they want to survive, and they want to multiply, and they want to keep growing. So the reason that corms happen is because the plant is trying to multiply. So it can happen because it feels like it's going to die. So it's sort of like a last hooray and just being like, I'm about to just do the best that I can to continue a version of me because I'm about to die. Could be one. The other one is that it's root bound and happy, so it's just multiplying because it basically feels like it reached its max solar capacity where it's at, so it just begins to sprout more and more and more. So there's a few types of corms. Some of them are going to come from the middle of the stem, and then you're going to see them basically just coming out of like that with a long stolon. So at the beginning, they don't look like much, but if you give it a little more time, they begin to fill in, and that is where you get the corm. If you think you can plant this type or this one right here in like soil and grow a plant, you could, but you might be better off waiting for it to start to get a little chunky or more like a bulbous kind of shape, because that puts it a little closer to the final stage of like a corm. Those are still really skinny and basically the same width as the rest of the structure are going to have a harder time and most likely will rot. And harvesting corms is so easy. All you need to do is literally find one that's ready, grab it, and pull slightly. And that's it. You just got yourself a corm from your plant. So even though collecting the corm is really easy, and as you see, some of them are just more than happy to produce tens and tens of corms, the amount or the corminess of an Alocasia is going to be dependent on the species. So you have certain species that just do not corm at all, and they mostly just kind of clump. So you'll have the new plant like sprout from right next to it and just have like a little plant right in it. And there's other ones that just put out corms nonstop. Like they're tiny little things in like a 2-inch container, and yet they're out here just pushing more and more corms. So it really depends on what plant you have, what species you have, and where it is in its process. I don't really think there's a correlation between how many corms are produced and whether or not it has reached maturity in inflow. Because I've had a lot of plants produce a lot of corms way before they reach maturity. So once you collected your corm, the next steps should be fairly easy. So all you need to do is put it into a container with the right substrate and keep it into a high humid environment. Right, so I'm like, okay, that's so simple. What exactly does that mean? The first one, and the one that I recommend that you use, is going to be this. This is Fluval Stratum. This is a substrate that is more intended for aquariums. It's meant to be like that bottom layer that you have with like your fish or different kind of things like that. But it is basically made out of like a type of volcanic rock. And it's just chef's kiss for any kind of Alocasia in itself. However, I personally don't find you putting 100% of this particular fluval to be that effective. So there's two things that I personally don't love about stratum. The first one is going to be that it kind of dissolves. So as you're using it, it comes in this tiny little nodule, but then as you're watering it or time goes by, it kind of dissolves more into just like dirt or powder. So it ends up being a lot more gunky, almost like a mud, more like a mud. That's a better way of putting it. And the second is that it kind of grows mold. Like I'm not sure if it's exactly mold because I haven't tested it with my microscope, but I think it grows this fuzzy white-like thing, film, growth around the surface of the stratum. So I was told what exactly that is and how to fix it, and I'm going to tell you at the end of this video during the how to prevent my molding stratum. The next one should be no surprise because this is just perlite. Perlite is the core ingredient whenever you're making any kind of mixes for aroids, whether it is just with sphagnum or non sort of soil mixes, those aroid mixes. You want to add more perlite because it adds more aeration and also captures moisture in a way that plants like aroids just absolutely love. So I have seen, and I know you can, just use straight up 100% perlite and use that to sprout your corm. I have not had any issues doing that, except that sometimes perlite tends to grow algae really fast. And the way I prevent that is exactly the same way that I prevent the mold from the stratum. And the last most common substrate being used to harvest corms is going to be sphagnum moss. So basically you're gonna chop it up really tiny, and then you're putting it in a container to stay moist, not wet, not damp, and then you put the corm in it. Personally, I find that to be the worst or the least recommended way of growing and sprouting corms, because the odds of this getting too moist, of it growing mold, of it just going awry are super high. So 100% sphagnum, I do not recommend. However, if you are set on using sphagnum, I would mix it with perlite. So you can do like a 60% perlite and then just chop up the sphagnum really tight with like scissors. And that should allow you to get enough of a moisture, but also not too much that it rots your corm. So whether you're doing perlite, whether you're doing fluval or sphagnum, you're going to need a container, which is the next part. Honestly, this is the one that has the most wiggle room out of everything. You can use basically whatever you want. So you can use 2 cups on top of each other. You fill up some of it with like fluval or with the perlite, just a little bit. You make it moist, you seal it with some tape, and this just carries on the entire way as the plant grows and spikes. Same way, you can use literally any kind of plastic container that has a lid. So if you're using or buying this from the grocery shops with like chips or whatever it's in there, it really helps because it's clear and the lid is really tight, so it's like 100% humidity. So something like this or any kind of container that's clear with a lid is also going to work for your corms. So what I do know is going to happen is you're going to become a corm addict, which sounds a little closer to something else, but it's not that. It's going to be a corm addict because you're going to be wanting to do more and more corms, and every time one plant you just pluck them and you want to put them all and you want to see them sprout, and eventually you're going to be run out of those containers, because those containers are great if you put a bunch of them, but when they all sprout they dry out really fast, and then all of the roots tangle together. So if you have too many corms in the same container, it just gets a little messy if you don't like stay on top of it. So the next logical step for most people are to get one of these. This is a seedling tray. So you can do the exact same thing that we did with the cups, in which you grab the 2 seedling trays, you put them on top of each other. So you're basically creating your own little dome. Just cover the top with a little bit of tape. And then at the bottom, I would put it into some other kind of container. This is also like a takeout. So basically you allow the bottom part to be sitting on a tray, on a container, and then you make sure that this is always staying moist. So all of the trays and all of the cells are consistently getting moist. This will work out great until you begin to get some that are sprouting faster than others. So I found that to be the biggest issue with this particular technique is you're going to put a bunch of them, and then some corms are ready in like 2 weeks and they're already pushing up, other ones are not. So eventually you'll start pulling certain plugs here and plugs there, and then you end up with a tray that is a little inconsistent. Or the next thing that you could do is just put the entire tray inside a bigger container that has a lid, and that allows all of them to stay open with it. You could also just simply put it inside like a shoebox plastic container. So basically you put both trays in and you put it inside, and then you put the lid. This is going to work out really well because you get now to basically have all of these in 100% humidity. But let me tell you, the only downside to that is cross-contamination. So sometimes corm just begin to grow mold as part of the process. And whenever you're using this kind of like multi-tray in the same closed container like strategy, what I notice, at least with my stuff, is the same mold would just take over everything. So if I notice one of the corms on the top right would be molding, by 2 days later, if I had not treated or been on top of it, you would see mold growth across the entire container, and then it could potentially just tank all of them. So just make sure you stay aware of that and just stay on top of that. Now, the final frontier, the final step on your corm journey is going to be this, Whether you buy it, you make it, or whatever, this is probably going to be the top part whenever you drive your hobby to the next level. So this is basically individual cups for the Corm. This consists of 3 things that are very simply and easily available on Amazon. You can buy them pre-made and they're like $4. I think that's theft because you can make your own and it's not that difficult. So the first part is a 2-hander. This is a 3-ounce dessert cup with a lid. So this in itself already closes. So in order for you to use something within it, you could always use like a 2-ounce shot glass, which kind of fits perfectly, but then you need to sit there and make little holes to the shot glasses for however many you have. I find that to be a little too tedious. So what I do is I bought a 2-inch net pot and drop it. So as you can see, it doesn't have a perfect fit. So it goes above the container a little bit, which is not a problem if I'm putting something here that is already sprouting or is gonna be big, because this means nothing. But this does not allow the lid to go through. So what I do is I very simply just cut out the rim of this container, turn it into something like this, and then I very simply just push this in, and then it fits perfectly inside it, and now I can put the lid. So inside it, I always make sure to have some kind of wick, so you're able to basically pull the moisture from the entire thing, and then you're just going to fill this up with stratum. Personally, I like to do a 50% stratum, 50% perlite, and that is a mixture that I add in here. Don't fill it up to the top, just fill it like 3/4. Put your corm facing up, and then that's it. I mentioned putting the corm the right way up. So I wanna make sure I point this out just in case you are curious. You probably already know, but I wanna make sure you point it out. So corms have 2 different kind of structures. It's gonna have this peak, kind of pointy end, kind of like, in this case, it's got a little reddish. And then it's going to have the bottom structure. So this is just the bottom part. The top, where the leaf is going to come out of, is going to be the tiny little joint thing. So if you end up with one that is basically cut like this, so you only have just the corm, you have no way of knowing, just look for that kind of come together point. So one side is flat and the other one is pointy, and I hope you can see that. So one side is kind of pointy, and the other side is just straight up flat. So let's do it together just because I like to make a mess. So we're gonna do that. I already have a container literally with my 50-50 mix and a spoon. And then I just kind of very casually go like this. Pour it through. A couple of scoopies. Maybe one more for good luck. Perfectly. So now it's kind of full. You have your perlite and stratum in there. And then I'm going to grab my corm, make sure I do the pointy side up, or my pointy side up, and we're gonna smack it right in the middle. Right there. And then I would just kind of moisture this. All right, so after you do that, you're going to make sure your corm is on it upside up, or the right side up. You're going to grab your water, just fill it up. Just water the whole thing so you feel it coming up. Sometimes the water turns black because it's going through the stratum. Don't worry about that. It's not going to make much of a difference. Like, I mean, if it really bothers you, you can just like dump it out and then put something else in it. If not, it's fine. So in this case, so while I was talking to you, I filled it up and you can see that the water came all the way up, but now it's kind of touching the actual net pot. And that to me might mean that it's gonna get a little too moist. So what I do is I just dump out a little tiny bit of the extra excess, push it down, make sure that there's a space in between the net pot, but it's being connected by the wick, and the wick is going all the way at the bottom. The plant is stable, and then we pop it. So this is going to prevent your corms from cross-contaminating to all of them. It's going to give them the perfect place to start off their journey, for them to push out roots and push out a few of its first few leaves before you even have to repot it. But this is a little bit top heavy, so you might not be able to put a bunch of these on a shelf and then not tip all of them over. And trust me, you do not want to tip like 10 of these and then just have everything just scatter and get all messy. So I recommend that you should do 2 things. The first one is, if it's going to be inside a cabinet or somewhere smaller, right, with a lot of lids, I recommend you getting a shot tray, like for actual shot glasses, because that fits the 3-in net pot perfectly. So as you can see in the footage, like it just holds 24. I have literally 50 of them just sitting there, and it's a perfect space saving tool. The other one, once they get kind of big and they begin to get once they get a little too big for the cabinet and they're ready for the outdoor, I use this. You can custom make one with like a printer or 3D printer, whatever you have that is fancy. But I'm not that fancy, and this is just a K-cup tray, straight up like for K-cups from Amazon. So the reason I thought it was perfect is because it captures right at the top. So you're able to carry an entire tray of all of these without it spilling. Like it doesn't go over, I can pull from it and then it won't go through because it fits perfectly that top part. And then this allows me to place them all up in the same thing, and it kind of pops back up whenever I place it. So this also allows me to then, when I have an entire tray of them, as you can see right here is an example of an entire tray of them, I can just look from underneath and then just take a little peek and see what exactly is already drinking all the water and what needs a little extra. The only caveat I will say about this is some of these plants begin to take up the water a lot faster than others. So sometimes when you have this kind of setup, you end up with one plant that is completely dry and the other one not so much. So you might need to come up with a more long-term solution or just transplant whenever you have one of them who begin to just like dry out really constantly. So you have your corm in your container, and then up next, you're probably going to want to go and put it under a grow light. And I'm not going to discourage you from doing that. Like you will be just fine because the grow light is going to encourage the warmth and all of that. But let's take a step back and think a little bit about how corms are produced and how they grow. So they're usually pushed under the dirt. They are in complete pitch blackness, and then from there, the new plant comes up and seeks the top. So you could very easily just put an entire tray of these into an area that is not well lit. It does not need to have a light above it because all you're waiting is for it to sprout. The most important part is that it's warm. So corms are going to sprout faster if they're warmer. So if you put them in under a grow light like this, it's going to sprout fast, not because of the light, but because it's warmer, because the light is making it warm. So if you find a warm space or you have like a cabinet or something like that, that it keeps the temperature hot, warm enough, like 75 to 80 Fahrenheit warm, that is going to give your corm the optimal stage to push out its leaf and new roots and just go for it. Once it has the first leaf coming out and is pushing, then of course move it under the light, and it's necessary for it to thrive. But don't put an entire army of corms under an entire grow light, because if you have a better use for that light, it might be better used for an actual leaf than just a corm trying to sprout. And temperature is exactly what I want to talk to you about, because earlier I mentioned that Fluval stratum creates a mold-like structure. And if you do not stay on top of that, it will take over your plant, it will rot your corm, and you're going to lose some money and time, and you're going to be sad. Like I said at the beginning of the videos, corms have a lot of potential, but also a lot of heartbreak. So I want you to know that the best way to prevent the mold from happening in the first place is going to be by keeping your corms hot or warm. So if you're keeping your temperature above 80, above 80, it will not grow this fussy kind of white thing. If you're more like me and you're chilling on a between 70 degrees and 80 degrees, fluctuating those 10 degrees up and down all day, you're going to get some of that mold. You're going to get some of that fuss. That's just the way it works. So I have I'm in South Florida. I have zero intention on actually purchasing like a warmer, a heater. No, like I don't need that in my life. So what happens is I cannot get the mold, and I need a solution for that. So here's my solution, and it's not rocket science. I use this for everything, and you should too. Hydrogen peroxide. Hydrogen peroxide. I know, it's super simple. Like, don't use it in your wounds, but use it in your plants. Like, I need you to make a 20, 25, 20. A 20% solution diluted. You can use a horticultural grade hydrogen peroxide if you're a purist. Personally, I don't care. So I just use the topical human black bottle 3% hydrogen peroxide and mix that with my water, and I spray that. So I make sure to spray the top of my container whenever I see any kind of mold, fuss, or algae, because hydrogen peroxide is the best way to get rid of algae. So if you have a container that has a bunch of algae and you keep cleaning it and watching it comes back, just squirt a little bit of hydrogen peroxide in there. It will not do anything to your plant. I mean, the plants go like extra oxygen, my roots love that. The algae is just gonna be like, and you will literally have it disappear from your container. So hydrogen peroxide is a must-have tool for all Alocasia growers, or just honestly just growers in general, because also when you get that mold on like the top of your substrate or like sphagnum, it does really, really well with that. So whenever you're dealing with corms, sometimes they get this white fuzziness around them and you want to be spraying them. So this reminds me of peeling corms. This is something that it's popular, and I don't know why people talk about it. It's like, you must peel your corm. It don't matter. Like, I mean, someone can fight me in the comments. Like, if you have like your experience, please share and tell me why I'm wrong. But I would like to tell you what I did. At the beginning, I used to do that because it's fun. It's fun to peel. You turn the whole thing white. It feels like you're accomplishing something, and it's kind of great. But in reality, all you're doing is just delaying the inevitable, which is that white skin is just going to oxidize and turn brown again. So, or it will turn green because it grows algae. So you're not really doing anything to help the actual plant. Like, it will be aight without this tiny little dry skin that you peel off. But there is a downside that you could contaminate, you could break, you could damage the actual corm by just trying to peel it. I personally don't peel my corms anymore. Most of them are just going to have a brown around and the cap is kind of already open. But if you're a cormer and a peeler, I'm not sure it's helping, but if you are and you think it is, please comment down below and tell me why, because mine just turned brown again in like 3-4 days. So corms, we love them, we hate them. They're necessary if you're into Alocasias. They are vital if you want to grow your collection. And it's a great part of growing Alocasias. I hope you learned something from this video. Don't forget to click like and subscribe. And YouTube thinks that this video is the best one for you next.